7 months. That's all it took for one of the most respected minds in modern football to go from Real Madrid's great hope to a cautionary tale. And now, for the first time, Xabi Alonso is telling us exactly what happened inside that dressing room. And it's not the story anyone expected. When Real Madrid announced Xabi Alonso as their new head coach in the summer of 2025, it felt inevitable. This was a man built for the Bernabeu, a World Cup winner, a Champions League winner, a player who ran midfields with a kind of quiet intelligence that made the hardest job in football look simple. He had just spent years turning Bayer Leverkusen into champions of Germany, doing it his way, doing it brilliantly, ending an unbeaten league season that people still talk about as one of the great coaching achievements of the decade.
I think he's a top manager. I think it's a great appointment.
Real Madrid didn't just want a coach, they wanted a philosophy. And Alonso was supposed to be the man who finally gave Los Blancos an identity that could outlast any single superstar, something the club had chased for years through a revolving door of managers who came in promising structure and left leaving only trophies and confusion in equal measure. There was extra weight to that appointment too, because Alonso wasn't a stranger walking into an unfamiliar building. He had worn the Real Madrid shirt himself as a player, won trophies in that dressing room, understood the culture from the inside in a way an outside hire never could. That history was supposed to be an advantage, a shortcut past the usual adjustment period every new coach has to survive. Instead, it may have raised expectations even higher, because this wasn't meant to be a stranger learning the club. This was meant to be a son of the house finally coming home to lead it. For a while, it looked like it might actually work. Alonso's Madrid started the season with real promise, pushing through the Club World Cup with a tactical clarity that had pundits talking about a new era at the club. There was a sense, briefly, that Real Madrid had finally found someone who could build something that didn't depend entirely on individual brilliance to paper over the gaps. But football at Real Madrid does not deal in patience. Every result is measured against history. Every setback becomes a referendum on whether you belong. And slowly, the cracks that nobody wanted to admit were there started to show. By January, those cracks had become a canyon. Real Madrid walked into the Spanish Super Cup final against their fiercest rivals, Barcelona, in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, needing a statement. What they got instead was a collapse. Barcelona walked away with the trophy, and the story that came out of that match wasn't really about the scoreline at all. It was about a moment caught on camera afterward, Alonso trying to usher his players forward to shake hands, to show respect in defeat, and Kylian Mbappe, the most expensive man on the pitch, appearing to walk straight past him. No acknowledgement, no eye contact, just a superstar ignoring his own manager in front of the entire football world. A single silent gesture that somehow said more about the state of that dressing room than any post-match press conference ever could. That clip spread everywhere within hours, and it crystallized something that insiders had already been whispering. Xabi Alonso, for all his tactical genius, was losing the one thing every manager needs to survive at a club like Real Madrid: the dressing room. The numbers told their own brutal story. Madrid were sitting 4 points behind Barcelona in La Liga. They were 7th in the Champions League table, a position unthinkable for a club with this club's history and this squad's talent. Reports began surfacing that senior players didn't fully trust his methods, that meetings had grown tense, that the calm authority Alonso carried as a player simply wasn't translating into control as a coach. A day after that Supercopa defeat, Real Madrid confirmed it. Xabi Alonso and the club had parted ways by what they called mutual consent. 7 months, 233 days. That's how long the dream lasted before it ended in a hotel corridor in Jeddah, with a former teammate, Alvaro Arbeloa, stepping in to pick up the pieces of a project that had promised so much just months earlier. For months after that, Alonso disappeared from the spotlight. No interviews, no explanations, nothing but silence while speculation filled every gap he left behind. Fans argued over whose fault it really was. Pundits picked apart every tactical decision from the outside, as if hindsight made them qualified to have seen it coming all along. And through all of it, the man at the center of the story said nothing. That silence is exactly what makes what he said just this August so significant. Alonso didn't hide behind excuses. He called it a scar. His words, not ours. A wound that took time to heal, one that reshaped how he sees himself as a coach and as a person. He admitted something that will stop you in your tracks if you know how obsessive top-level coaches usually are about the game. He said that during that period he genuinely didn't watch much football at all. Think about what that means. A man whose entire career whose entire identity has been built around studying the sport at the deepest possible level, stepped away from it completely. Not because he stopped loving it, but because Real Madrid had taken something out of him that needed time to come back. This is the part of the story most people missed while they were busy mocking the Mbappe clip or arguing about tactics. Xabi Alonso wasn't just losing football matches, he was losing pieces of himself. And he's choosing to tell us that now, on his own terms, from a very different place, at a point where he no longer needs anyone's sympathy or permission to say it plainly. Because here's where the story turns. Alonso didn't disappear forever. This summer, he resurfaced at Chelsea, taking on the project of rebuilding a club that has spent years searching for exactly the kind of identity he was supposed to build in Madrid. It's a smaller stage in some ways, less pressure from history, more room to actually work without every training session becoming a national headline. It's also, in its own way, a second chance to prove that what happened in Madrid was about fit and timing, not about whether he actually belongs among the sport's elite coaches. And by his own account, that scar has healed. He's not running from what happened at the Bernabeu. He's using it. There's something almost poetic about the timing of all this. While Alonso was opening up about his failure in Madrid, Real Madrid itself had already moved on twice more, eventually turning to Jose Mourinho, a manager who has built an entire career on thriving inside exactly the kind of pressure that broke Alonso. Two completely different approaches to the same impossible job. One built on calm tactical philosophy that couldn't survive the noise. One built on controlling the noise itself, using it as fuel instead of trying to quiet it down. So what do we actually take from this? It's tempting to look at Xabi Alonso's 7 months at Real Madrid and call it simply a failure. But that misses what makes this story worth telling. This was one of football's smartest minds, walking into the most demanding job in the sport, discovering that intelligence alone isn't enough, and then having the honesty months later to say so out loud instead of pretending it never happened. That kind of admission is rare in football. Egos in this sport are usually too fragile for it, and coaches far less accomplished than Alonso have spent entire careers refusing to admit a single mistake. There's a lesson in this for anyone who thinks football management is purely a game of tactics on a whiteboard. Alonso is one of the most tactically literate coaches of his generation, and none of that saved him once the human side of the job broke down. Man management, timing, the ability to read a room full of players who each have their own egos, their own contracts, their own version of what the team should look like. That is arguably the harder skill, and it doesn't show up on a tactics board. Real Madrid didn't just test his football brain, it tested everything else a coach needs. And for 7 months, that was the part that gave way first. Whether Xabi Alonso can turn Chelsea into something lasting is still an open question. But one thing is already clear. The manager rebuilding in London right now is not the same one who walked into the Bernabeu with all that promise a year ago. He's been tested in the worst possible way, in the harshest possible spotlight, and he's still standing. Real Madrid may have left him with a scar, but scars, as anyone who's actually fought through one will tell you, are proof that you survived something that could have finished you completely, and sometimes proof that you came out the other side knowing exactly who you are.